Welcome to The Explainer. So 50 years ago, the Vietnam War officially ended. But if you look closely at the landscape and the people living there, you'll quickly realize that the cleanup is far from over. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of survival, cutting-edge science, and a massive ongoing effort to heal an entire nation. To really grasp the sheer scale of what we're talking about, you need to picture this: 500,000 cubic meters. That is the staggering amount of highly toxic dirt currently sitting at the Bien Hoa Air Base in Vietnam. We're talking enough contaminated soil to fill 40,000 dump trucks. And right now, engineers are literally baking this earth at extreme temperatures just to eradicate the deadly chemicals hiding inside it. Wait, 40,000 trucks worth of toxic dirt? How do you even begin to erase a 50-year-old toxic legacy of that magnitude?
Exactly. It is absolutely one of the most complex environmental and human challenges in modern history.
Historia. Section 1, a 50-year toxic legacy. So we hear the term Agent Orange all the time, but where did all this poison actually come from, and what makes it so incredibly dangerous? Let's rewind the clock for a second. Back in 1968, U.S. forces sprayed over 19 million gallons of defoliants to strip away dense jungle cover. Agent Orange was the primary herbicide they used. But here's the thing. The real danger wasn't just the weed killer itself. It was a highly toxic byproduct created during manufacturing called dioxin. This stuff seeps deep into the soil, travels right up the food chain, and causes lasting environmental destruction.
Historia. Section 2. Ecological and human toll.
Historia, today, Vietnam is still dealing with about 28 heavily contaminated hotspots, and the toll is just heartbreaking. The government estimates around 3 million people suffer health issues linked to this exposure, and it's multi-generational. Take a 34-year-old man named Nguyen Phuong Hai. He lives near one of these former bases in Da Nang, and he was born with severe developmental challenges, struggling with everyday tasks like simply buttoning his shirt. On the environmental side, nearly half of Vietnam's protective mangrove forests were totally destroyed, with soil nutrients heavily leached away. Wow. With 3 million people affected, is there an official agreed-upon link between the chemical drops and these specific illnesses? Officially, it's highly contentious. Vietnam identifies victims by checking family histories and health problems in contaminated areas. But historically, the U.S. has focused way more on environmental clearance rather than funding human causality studies in Vietnam. As Charles Bailey, an expert on this topic, notes, the science of causality is still incomplete. There's always been this friction between actually cleaning up the dirt and officially proving the human link. History. Section 3. Decontaminating Bien Hoa Air Base. But despite that historical friction, massive action is happening right now. Welcome to Bien Hoa Air Base, the site of the world's largest and most complex dioxin cleanup operation. Co-host? So what's the timeline for a massive project like this? When do they actually expect to be finished? Well, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. This joint U.S.-Vietnam initiative officially launched in 2019, and just recently, in 2025, they broke ground on a huge thermal treatment system and handed over 6 hectares of newly cleaned land. The treatment facility should be fully operational by 2026, with a hard target to completely eradicate the dioxin at Bien Hoa by 2030. However, a project of this magnitude relies heavily on international cooperation, which obviously makes it vulnerable to politics. In early 2025, changing U.S. administrations and shifting foreign aid policies led to temporary pauses in USAID contracts. And even when the funding was unfrozen shortly after, a lack of administrative staff physically on the ground in Vietnam created severe delays. It just goes to show how fragile these long-term humanitarian projects can really be.
Okay, politics aside, I have to ask the scientific question here. How do you actually extract an invisible poison from 500,000 cubic meters of dirt?
Historia. Section 4. Science of Dioxin Remediation.
Historia. To answer your question, it's basically extreme baking. They use what's called a thermal treatment process. First, they excavate all that heavily contaminated soil. Then, they load it into giant, specially designed ovens and heat it to incredibly high temperatures. This extreme heat literally breaks the molecular bonds of the dioxin, destroying the toxic molecules completely. Once it cools down, the clean, safe soil is returned to the earth. It is an absolutely amazing feat of engineering. Historia, Section 5, Shifting Generational Perspectives. So, while scientists are out there fixing the land, how are the people dealing with the history? I mean, 50 years is a long time.
How do younger Vietnamese view the war compared to their parents or grandparents?
It's a really striking contrast. For the first-generation diaspora, April 30th is deeply traumatic. They often refer to it as Black April, a time of mourning for the lost republic and the pain of exile. But the second and third generations, the ones born or raised after the war, they're pushing back. They're evading this strict war identity. They see modern Vietnam as a rapidly developing global hub, not the war-torn place of their parents' memories. They're embracing a much more forward-looking global perspective.
Historia. Section 6. The unfinished business of peace.
You see, Vietnam today is a massive economic success story, transitioning from severe post-war poverty to a super dynamic middle-income nation. But these physical remediation efforts are absolutely essential for this modernization to be complete.
So, looking forward, what does the ultimate finish line actually look like for Vietnam?
The finish line is clearly defined by some very ambitious official targets. The goal is to completely finish the dioxin cleanup at Bien Hoa by 2030. But there's another massive challenge, which is unexploded ordnance, or UXO. That's the millions of bombs and landmines still buried in the ground. The government's target is to basically clear all UXO-contaminated land nationwide by 2045. That is the true finish line for making the land entirely safe.
Historia, which leaves us with this final thought. We have the technology to bake the poison out of the soil, and we have new generations ready to look to the future. But 50 years later, it really begs the question, can a nation ever truly clean up the past? Or do we simply learn how to build a better future right on top of it? This explainer was created with the help of AI. If you want more stories like this, make sure to check out 30 Seconds of History on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify. See you next time.